G'day guys, today I'll be showing you how to break down a full lamb from start to finish, including all your roasts, your chops, your sausages from the trimmings. And this lamb is probably about a 9 to 12 month old. It's weighing in at 20 kilos and it's looking pretty nice. It's hung for a few days and is ready to bust up. So let's get into it. A few tools you're going to need is a cleaver, a nice sharp boning knife. I'm using a Victory knife, a handsaw, a sausage filler can be cheap, and a mincer also can be cheap and small. Alrighty, so here I'm going to be taking off the forequarter from the hindquarter, and here I'm just checking the ribs. So I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4. You want to put your knife in between the 4th and 5th rib to separate it from the rack or the forequarter. So here I'm just putting my knife in between the ribs and running it straight down and through, like so. Alrighty, so we're going to flip him around now, and we're going to mark down around his back spine, just following the cut we made down and along. We're going to join these cuts up in a second. Alright, so I've just switched to a better angle so you can see better. I've zoomed out. So here you can see I'm just joining up the cut there on the other side of the lamb. As you can see, I did do one too many bones on the other side, which is no drama at all. It just makes it a tiny bit harder to hack it off with the saw, but no biggie at all there. Alright, so now we're going to separate the legs off of the loin chops. So here you can just looking at the loins. So they're your loin chops there. That's where they come from, just below the legs. So I'm just going to find there's a tiny little joint in between the chump and the loin. So just poke your knife in there around near the spine, and your knife, see that, how it just pokes in like that? It's going to make it very easy to separate from. You won't even need to saw it. Just run your knife along, nice and straight, keep him nice and straight, just like that. Then I'm going to flip him and do it on the other side. Alright, so now those cuts are connected either side. We've flipped him over and we're going to connect the cuts here. There you go. And now you won't even need to use a saw. You can just bend him and snap him off like that. So there you go. Your legs are now taken off from your loins. So that's the first major part done. Perfect. Alrighty, so now we're going to get into sawing off the barrel from the forequarter, or the where your loins and racks come from, off your forequarter, and we can start making some progress. So sawing can take a long time, so what I'm going to do is, with some of the sawing I'll skip through it, but it's pretty simple. You're just sawing through your cuts that you've made and connecting them up. All you're doing is getting through that bone so you can separate into the lamb into 3 pieces pretty much. As you can see here, I'm cutting through that spine now, and I'll be connecting those 2 cuts just like so. Now they're off. There we go. So now your forequarter has been separated from your barrel or your trunk. Throw that over there. And now we're going to split the barrel into 2s. So this part is a bit tedious and takes a little bit of time, especially with a handsaw. But the whole reason I'm doing it with a handsaw is to show you that you can do this at home. You don't need any heavy machinery. You don't need to fork thousands out. So here I'm just showing you want to split nicely down the middle, nice and evenly in between that bone there, so that way you've got bone on either side of your loin chops and your racks. So I will skip through this part because it did take me probably about 2 minutes, but you just want to be making sure that you're keeping your cut nice and straight, and just take your time. Bloody beautiful if you did that the first go. Righto. I was going to make a put a song over that, but I laughed too hard at the noise of me sawing it in half, so I left it. Alright, so now we've got two pieces of the barrel separated. Alright, so here's your lamb rack on one side and your lamb loins on the other. So here we're going to, I'm just taking a bit of trimmings off the lamb loin here, which is actually your lamb fillet or your lamb tenderloin, as you might hear some people call it. And I'm just going to take a bit of meat off this lamb flap here. It's the lamb belly or rack. There's so many different names. Alrighty. So we're just going to cut along right about, when I get my knife, right about there. I'm going to leave I'm not cutting through any of the bones there. I'm just going to mark where the bones end on the rack. That way we're not picking bones out of the loin chops and you're getting more cutlets. So you can see it's pretty easy with a handsaw on some parts. It can get harder. Alright, so there's your lamb loin, all done. We're going to trim him up later. And now we're going to move on to the lamb rack. So you can see there's quite a bit of fat in there. So we're going to get rid of a bit of that so it's a nice eating experience. So with your rack, we're going to take this fat cap off the ribs. So you can see your eye there. We're just going to I mark just a bit before it, and then I go to the other side of the rack and mark there, and then I connect the two cuts. Now make sure your knife's sharp for this because it's can be a bit tedious. You just want to get your knife in on top of those bones and peel that fatty meat off the bones. Running your knife nice and hard against the bones on a nice angle. You shouldn't run into any dramas. It should all just peel off, especially if your knife is sharp. Alrighty, so here's your lamb flap or lamb belly. You can roll this into a roast if you want. It will be really fatty. You can stuff it. You can do anything with this, but I'm going to strip it up just for the sake of making sausages later on in the video, just so I've got a little bit more meat for snags. So I'm just cutting it into mincing sized chunks because I've only got a little mincer. And we'll trim a bit of that fat off later. I don't use all of this because it is a bit fatty, but I use most of it. So all I'm doing here is taking a bit of the bone off the rack, or flipping him upside down and running it through my saw, just so the cutlets are obviously going to fit in a pan. The bones can be a bit long, so obviously you're not going to want to cook with a ginormous amount of bones like this. It can be pretty tedious, like I said. Your blade can get stuck a bit, especially if it's not sharp. Mine definitely needs a new blade, but for the sake of the video I just went to use it. You can just run your knife through. If you've cut through, there'll be a little bit of meat holding on still. That's alright. There's some doggy scraps, or you can take the meat out from in between the bones if you really want. And here I'm just going to take the chine bone off, where I'm running my knife now. It's where where you've split it down the middle. There's going to be bone stopping you from cutting your rack into cutlets. So here I'm just putting my saw through that small bit of bone. You don't want to cut into the meat. It's just the backbone is just coming off. There you go. So you can see the bone there and what you're taking off. Not much, just the bone. So here I'm going to French the rack. You don't have to do this at all if you don't want. It's literally just putting your knife in between the bones and taking the meat out. But personal preference, I do prefer the meat on the cutlet. I reckon it's the best part, chewing on the bone. So that's all done. You can put your trimmings into your sausage pile. Those little intercostal bits make great snags because they're nice and they've a bit of meat on them. So here you can see I'm just showing you the bones and where we're going to cut in between. You can see in between each bone, especially now that we've taken that chine bone off, we can now run our knife easily through. The first one might be a bit tricky with the angle going on with the bone, but he's still going to be a good cutlet. just run your knife through. Obviously, guys, too, you don't have to have cutlets. You can have a lamb rack if you wanted to, but I prefer cutlets, so I'm cutting them into cutlets. You can see that beautiful fat cap too, fat cover on the cutlets. They'll crisp up nicely in the pan. You get a considerable amount of cutlets out of this too. And that M1's a bit wonky, just because it's done with a handsaw, so you're going to get a few wonky bits. But I just take the bone out and square him up on one side so he sits flat in the pan. There's a little bit of soft bone in there, so you don't want to put him in your trim either. You can see there, really nice looking cutlets. Nice bit of fat on them. And a nice chunk of meat. So if you guys want to go ahead and do that second side of the barrel, I'm not going to do it on camera as I've already done one. I don't need to do two, but I will trim this loin up for you and cut him into chops. So like I said earlier, there's a big clump of fat in there that you just want to run your knife in really gently and it will peel open like that. You don't want to cut all the way through. You're just marking it so the meat separates from the fat. And then you're going to get your knife and just peel that fat out, not cutting through all the tail. You're just taking that fat out. You can see the seam will open up. There we go, so you've got a big fat clump of suet. And you can see the tail, there's a fair bit of fat on the tail, which I'm going to take off and expose that meat that I just showed you there. So this is pretty simple, you're just peeling it off with your knife. If it's nice and sharp, this should be easy. You don't have to do this is just personal preference, just so it's not so fatty. Alright, so now I'm going to mark out my loin chops. You should get about 6 to 8 off a loin. So I'm just marking them out with my knife here, just to count how many I'm going to get. And I'm just going to put my knife down and through. Obviously you're not going to cut through the bone, but this will make it easier to handsaw or hit with your cleaver. You can see there I've got a nice amount of chops there, and we're going to start hacking at it with the handsaw and cleaver. So I did have a bit of trouble here with the handsaw, so I sped this up a bit. I split the loin into twos just to make it more manageable, and I did mark it a bit and make the bone easier to smash through with my cleaver with the handsaw, but it is really hard to get nice loin chops apart just with a big handsaw like this. You probably could use a smaller one, but here I'm getting my cleaver and I'm just tapping them away. Just tap until they come apart. Sometimes you do need to use a bit of force like that and they will come apart and you'll get your nice loin chops. Look at them, there's nothing wrong with them at all. Nice fat coverage, spot on. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the same with these ones. You're going to want to watch your fingers here. So you just need a little bit of force just to smash them apart, but if you've got a nice good sharp cleaver, it should not be too hard. So now we've finished the lamb cutlets and loin chops, we are going to move on to the lamb legs. Like I said, with the second side of the trunk, guys, I'm not going to do that in the video as there's no need. You've just watched me do one, so I'm sure you guys will be right to do that on your own if you just pause the video. So here I'm just taking a bit of this meat off. We'll use this for snags, just cleaning up the legs a little bit. If your knife's sharp, you should be able to just separate this very easily. There is a lot of seams to follow, so once you start cutting ever so lightly, you will be able to just pull the meat away. Just like so, just cleaning up a bit of that fat. Your legs can have lots of clumps of fat on them, so just clean them up to your desire. And if it's for you, don't think it has to be pretty. I'm a butcher, so I do like to try and make things look pretty, but we don't normally do this with a handsaw, so it's not always going to be top-notch quality that we're going to put in the display case. Alright, so what we're going to do first is we're going to separate the chump from the legs, which is your lamb rump. If you've ever heard of a lamb rump roast or chump chops, this is where they come from. So I'm just going to mark with my knife where I'm going to cut with the saw, just above that tailbone. So you can see the tailbone there and you can see where I've marked. So I'm just going to cut that off. Comes off pretty easy. Working with big chunks with your hand saw is a lot easier than trying to cut loin chops. So there you go, there's your chump. You can use that as a roast, but for the video, I'm going to show you how to cut it into chump chops. So we're separating two legs now, just down the middle there. There's only a tiny bit of soft bone that you just got to saw through. It's really not that hard to saw through this part, and you're just going to take that tailbone out and feed it to the dog. So we're going to clean up a bit of the fat off these legs here. Once again, you don't have to do this, but I'm just going to do it for my sake. Nice and easy, just pulling that fat out with your knife, leaving as much meat on the leg as you can. You only want to take off the heavy fat. You don't want to take too much off to make it too lean. Fat's always good, fat's flavour. Now I'm going to take the shank off from the leg. You can joint this or you can leave it on, but where I'll show you now is there's a little tiny joint just up here where the shank joins the leg. Just so you want to put your knife in just on top of that. You'll feel it fall into the joint. Mark around your shank there. Connect your lines. And you'll see in there's a little joint, a little bowl joint. You just want to put the tip of your knife in between that and cut through it, and your shank will come apart. There you go. Leg one done. It's as easy as that. Same deal here. Gonna clean the leg up just a little bit, removing some of that fat. A lot of lamb will have heavy fat on it, and if you're cutting up something big, it will be a lot more fattier than this. Like I said, this is only young. Alright, so now we're going to take the shank off this leg too. Same deal, just above that little joint. Mark through and put the tip of your knife in, and it will separate really easily. It might take you a few goes, but no stress. Leg two done. So there you go, you got two nice big juicy lamb legs ready to go for the slow cooker or the crock pot, and you trim. Alright, so now we're onto the chump chops. This part is going to be a bit tricky for some. We're just taking a bit of the fat out there from inside. You just don't have to do this. This is tricky. You can leave it as a roast, but I'm just peeling. You can see that circle of meat there that I'm just separating from the bone and lifting it up. I'm not taking it off, but I'm exposing a little joint, I guess you'd call it, that you got to put your knife through. So this is hard to explain, but there is a small joint there that you can see with your eyes, maybe not with the camera. But you can see where I've marked it there and where the bone is. So you just want to sort of wiggle your knife in that and work your way along the bone and get under it. You can see I'm opening it up here on the corner of the bench, which will just give you more access. And doing the other side now. Like I said, guys, this is tricky. You don't have to do this. You can leave that whole chump as a roast. It will cook up beautifully. There will be a fair bit of bone, but or you don't even have to do this either. You can just run your saw straight through the whole chump and you'll get really big chops with a bit of bone through them, but there's nothing wrong with that. So now that's all separated, I'm going to stand him up and just take that big chunk of bone out from the middle. I left a little bit of meat on here, but we'll clean him up and put him into sausages. No dramas there. And you can see in the background there you've got your two nice little chump bits, which also you can roast both of them if you wanted to. But for the video's sake, I think people would like to see more chops. So what I'm going to do is cut him into chops. So there's your chump chop face there. I'm just taking a bit of the fat off. Well, like I said, you don't have to take fat off. If you like a nice fatty chop, there's nothing wrong with that. Right, so I'm going to start marking these chops out now so I can run the saw into them and hit them with the cleaver. The first cut will probably not be much of a chop, which you'll see in a second here when I'm starting to mark them out. So that one just cuts straight through, no bone there, not a chop. You can cook him up if you like, but there's not much to eat other than fat. So I'm going to take that fat off and chuck the meat in the trim pile. And I'm just marking out nice, decent size chops, probably a bit thicker than your thumb. You can see there your chump chops starting to get exposed. Beautiful. Alright, so we're going to do the same to the next side. Same deal, first chop, not much chop. I'm going to take the fat off and put the meat into the trim pile. Make sure you keep your bones out of that trim pile too. If you've got a little mincer, it's not going to like getting bones put into it. It's going to really clog it up, blunt the mincer blade, and you're going to have a nightmare. So really watch if you're getting any bone in there, and keep a bone pile and a trim pile. So I'll speed this up here, sawing it. Alrighty, so if you manage to cut them and bash them out with your cleaver, you've got yourself good 8 chump chops, all done and looking good. So far we should have about 16 loin chops, 16 cutlets, and probably about 8 chump chops, which is pretty standard for your 20 kilo lamb. Alright, so we're going to move on to the shoulder here. This is where stuff's going to get a little bit tricky. So what I'm going to be doing here is taking the shank and a bit of the bone out, which is going to get you a nice square cut lamb shoulder. So that is the breastbone and the shank coming off the shoulder here. And that breastbone meat won't go to waste, so don't stress about that. If you're thinking you're cutting off a big chunk of chops, you're not at all. It's going to get turned into mince. So this is pretty easy to saw through. You don't have to stress too much about this, and you get your nice 4/4 shank out of it with that breastbone meat. So you can just cut the breastbone off your shank. There shouldn't be any bone holding it together. There you go, you've got your nice shank there. And stand your breastbone up and just cut straight down through the meat. You can see that seam pulls away from the bone really easily. Same deal here, no bone holding it together. Stand him up and just cut on top of that bone down where the meat is. It separates nice and you get a good chunk of meat. 2 bones for the doggy. You can clean your shanks up if you want to so they sit flat, but you don't have to. Alright, moving on to the lamb shoulder. So your shoulder chops. We're going to start by cutting the neck off here with the saw. And that neck will create a very, very good slow cooker roast. So you can throw the whole thing in the slow cooker and you get a reasonable amount of meat out of it. So definitely don't waste that, unless you want to give it to the dog if you find it a bit gross cooking it, but it's some really good meat. So this is the same deal with the lamb barrel or the lamb trunk that we split in half to get your racks and loins. You're going to want to get your saw and just cut straight down the guts of it. So there's that same bone that you want to cut in between or cut straight through the middle of. I'm going to speed this up again, guys, because this was a fair bit of sawing. It probably took me another couple of minutes. Alrighty, your 2 4/4. You can leave one as a roast if you want. A square cut shoulder roast, it'll cook up like a dream. Absolutely no doubt about it. So I'm just going to take a bit of this fat off that sits under the neck. There's a fair old clump in there. I definitely recommend cutting it out. It's going to make your chops just a little bit too fatty. So what I'm going to do here, I did stuff up a little bit with the chops. I wasn't thinking, I was marking out the wrong side first. So you've got 2 sides to the chop. You've got a round boner chop and your normal barbecue chop, which I'm marking now, the normal barbecue chop, where I was supposed to mark the round bone or the shank chop off first, but that's no biggie there for the video. So I'm just marking them out, ready to cut with the handsaw. And as you can see, I realised I stuffed up there, but kept going. Alright, so you got about 8 chops out of that, I think. 6 to 8, depending on thickness. Now you want to flip him to the side that you cut the shank off and mark, well, do this first, mark the shank side first, where I'm marking now, and you should get 3 nice chops out of that. So from the side that you cut the lamb shank and the breastbone off, you're going to get 3 good round boner chops out of that, and then you're going to flip him around the other side and start cutting the other chops, which you'll see in a minute. So it's the exact same deal as your chump chops and your loin chops. You just want to saw through. I did find this part a little bit difficult as I'm normally using a bandsaw, but I still managed to get it off, which I'll show you how in a minute. You can see there a nice little round boner chop coming off, and I'm just working on the other one. So you just want to cut through that round bone, and then when you get to your rib bones there, you can see them sticking out. You just want to peel him off that and leave those rib bones there, because cutting through them on the handsaw is going to be really difficult as they move around a lot. So you can see those rib bones there sticking out. Just cut through that shank bone, the circle bone, and then stop when you hit the rib bones, and then you can use your knife to peel him off. Later on I do go and clean up those rib bones sticking out on the saw. Obviously if you don't have one, you don't have to do that, but it's just so they're a bit cleaner, fit in the pan a bit better. You don't have a big bone sticking out. But these chops cook up beautifully, these round bone chops. You'll see them in the supermarkets or at your local butcher sometimes. They are really, really nice. You can see all the marks there that I made when I stuffed up. But yeah, there's the rib bones there I'm talking about. You can try and cut them off with the handsaw, but it is going to be a pain in the ass, so you can also just leave them on. Here I'm just marking through them just so my handsaw can cut these shoulder chops a bit easier. These ones is not as hard to cut as the round boner. They sit nice and flat on the bench, and you got a bit more grip, I guess you could say, when cutting these. So you can see here I'm just marking them out. You're not going to be able to cut very deep because there is a fair bit of shoulder bone in there, and you just want to start hacking away with your saw. And like I said, that bone sticking at the end, I do clean these up on my bandsaw, but once again, you don't have to, especially if you're doing this just for yourself at home. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look 100%. But this is going to be the best way and the cheapest way you're going to get the most out of your lamb. So you can see there your first barbecue chop. I was just showing you there where I'm going to cut off. You can try and cut that with your handsaw, but like I said, it is going to be difficult. Unless you had some sort of vise that was nice and clean, you could sort of hold the chop into to cut off if you really wanted to, but I don't think you need to go to all that effort just for a little bit of bone. You see there we're getting into nice, more meatier chops now. They're looking pretty good, nice and meaty with that nice bit of fat cap on top. I'm going to speed this up, guys, because I think you get the idea, and we'll jump on to the next part. Alrighty, so having a look at what we've done so far we've got our lamb shanks. We should have 4. Your forequarter and hindquarter off your legs and off your shoulders. Your loin chops off your 2 loins. A pile of trimmings, which can be trimmed down even further if you want less fatty sausages. All you got to do is just take your knife and cut a bit of that fat off there. You've got your lamb neck, which you can throw straight into your slow cooker and shred the meat off it, which will come out really nice. You've got your cutlets from your lamb rack, which I've only got one side here done, but you would have done both sides when I said to pause the video. You've got your chump chops off your legs. You've got your lamb legs, which I have gone ahead and cut mine in half on the saw, which you don't need to do, so don't worry if yours looks bigger than mine. And you've got your 2 shoulders, your left and right shoulders, cut into chops there. I have gone ahead, like I said, and zipped those long bones off, and I did run my second shoulder through the saw just for time's sake. And then you've got your shank chops there, which are off the other side of your shoulder. So now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to package all this for myself, and we're going to start making some sausages with the trimmings. So I did speed this up, but with the trimmings here, I'm just taking off a lot of the meat, getting rid of a bit of the fat there. It's pretty straightforward. You just want to stick your knife in under the meat or over the fat, just so your sausages aren't too fatty, but personal preference, it's up to you. If you want fattier snags, that's completely fine. You don't have to have super lean sausages. If you really want to utilize every single piece of the cut, you can do that. Alright, so this is my mincer I'm using today. It's from Winequip products in Australia. It's not too bad, it's pretty good, it's pretty big. I think it was about $600, but you guys can pick up a mincer for way under that, for $50 or $100. Obviously it's probably not going to be quite as good and aggressive, but if you're only doing this occasionally, then you don't need to go fork out too much money, especially that's why I'm doing this video, so you can understand that you can do this on a very, 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 very small budget. Alright, so what we're going to do now is fire up the mincer, and I'll have to do a voiceover of this because it's going to be too loud to record and talk. Alright, so this part did go for a very long time, so I did speed it up, but you can see here I'm just feeding little small bits at a time through the mincer. You don't want to overload it, especially if you've got a cheap one. It can bog down and you'll have to pull it apart and clean it back up. But if you've got a mincer, I'm assuming you know how to use it, so I'm not going to demonstrate that. But you can see here I'm rolling it into little bowls, the mince it's already ran through, and I'm running it through a second time just to get rid of any little pieces of gristle or anything, just to make sure it is nice and chopped up for our snags. You can see the difference when it's coming out now. It looks more nice and pink, soft and fluffy. So we're just getting all the little bits out of there. You will get a bit of mince stuck around the sides, but that's no biggie. You can just use a little bit of fat to push the remainder of the meat stuck in the worm out, which I'm doing here. As you can see, it's all the fat started to come out now. It will help you though. It will push the remainder meat that's all stuck in your worm out. So there you go, you got your lamb mince all done. Now that our mincing's all done, we're about to start making our snags. I've just got these collagen casings. You can get these anywhere online at any butcher supply. You probably will have to buy more than 2 or 3, but they come in handy and they last a long time. So they're really easy to use, really easy to link. So we'll get into that in a minute. I'm just going to do a quick sausage here with Rip and Rub's Southern Zest. It's like a spicy one, which you can get at ripandrub.com.au. They work well in sausages. So we're just going to sprinkle a bit of this on the meat and mix it all in. Now, if you do not have a sausage filler, you can do exactly what I'm doing here and just roll them into skinless sausages or meatballs or anything like that. They do not have to be in a sausage skin. So you do not need to stress if you don't have a sausage filler. You can still have great tasting lamb mince meatballs or skinless sausages. You can even make shavapi with it, which is technically a skinless sausage, but look up a really good recipe. So once we get a bit more of this in, most sausage seasonings are 10% of the weight of the meat. So if you weigh your meat and you have a sausage premix that you have bought online, you can just go 10% and add 20% water. So 10% meal, 20% water. I'm not going to add any water to my snags today, as they're only for me, so I don't need them to be super good to sell. I reckon that is looking pretty good. Nice and mixed up. Red colour all through the meat. Beautiful. Alright, so we're going to wind our sausage filler back to fit our meat. And like I said, guys, these are as cheap as chips, and if you're not using them all the time, you only need a cheap one. Unless, of course, you're doing it a fair bit, you could invest in one and get one for probably under $1,000. That's just an electric foot pedal. So here we're just going to load our meat into the filler. I think these fit about a bit over a kilo. Alrighty, we'll load it up. Just give my hands a quick wipe. So when I was talking about the sausages before, I realised I had a thin skin. I'm using thick skins, same deal, collagen, but the thin would not fit over the nozzle. So make sure when you are ordering your skins that they are going to fit your nozzle, which your nozzle will have a diameter, and so will your skin. You just need to make sure that that's right so you don't get the wrong skin. Alrighty, and we're just going to crank the handle. Might need to suction him down, I think might be smart. If that's going to suction to that chopping board, we'll soon find out. You can see the meat pushing out now. Probably going to get a bit of air in that first bit of snag there, but you just want to create a little bit of pressure with your fingers to make sure that you're filling your skin nicely. As you can see, this is a slow process when you're using a hand cranked filler, but it's cheap and it works. Get a bit of a better angle there for you. All right. Oh. So it is probably better to use a stainless bench rather than a chopping board, but for the sake of the video and time, I'm just going to keep it on the chopping board. As you can see, we're getting a fair bit out of this mix, and it's looking nice and red. Anymore. All right, so you just tear your skin off like that. Take him off, make sure you keep him clean and you can reuse him. The leftover in the barrel there, just clean him out and use him as a burger. So now you got your sausages. So we're just going to do a quick link. Very simple. You don't have to do this. You can just twist them to the size you'll want. But I'm just going to do a link just for the video's sake. So I'm going to do him that size of a normal sausage, twist like that, pull him down, pinch the side here at the same length as the one you just did. All right, give him a pinch like that, fold the snag over, just fold the leftover over, I should say, and you're just gonna pull him through. Oh no, he broke, but anyway, you just want to pull him through that link there and it would come up and over, but that broke because it was too tight. But anyway, of course it happens when I'm doing a video. There's your snags, nice and easy burger and a little snag. There you go. Obviously you can get more snags than this. Like I said, buy some mince from the supermarket, mince all that lamb. You'll get a couple kilos of snags, especially if you're adding mince to it. But these look like pretty nice sausages, lamb and a bit of what was in that southern zest. There's heaps of herbs, spices, brown sugar, cayenne pepper. So it won't even taste like lamb if you're not a big lamb mince fan. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you learned a thing or two. I hope the point of view was all right, and we'll see you in the next one.